They banned me from Christmas. Not once, not twice years. My parents made it clear I was the shadow while my brother was the golden sun. They smiled at him, invested in him, and erased me like I was nothing. I thought I'd buried that hurt until the day he walked into a glass-walled interview room shaking hands with HR, bragging about his connections. He had no idea the CEO he was desperate to impress was me. The moment HR turned and said, "Our CEO has a few questions," his face drained white. I grew up in a house where the lights always seemed to shine on my younger brother Aaron and left the corners where I stood in shadow. Cleveland winters were sharp, the kind that bit through your mittens and made the windows rattle at night. I remember standing on the porch after school, clutching my science fair ribbon, watching my parents rush past me with a thermos of hot chocolate and a foam finger for Aaron's Little League game. They barely noticed I was there. At 9, I learned the quiet skill of swallowing my words. Whenever I wanted to tell them about a piano recital, the answer was always the same. "We're busy with Aaron's event." The words carved themselves into me, sharp and permanent. My father's voice, flat. My mother's smile, distracted. I sat on stage under fluorescent lights, fingers trembling over the keys, scanning the empty seats where parents should have been. The applause at the end felt thin without them. The only one who seemed to notice was my grandmother Margaret. She lived 2 streets over in a creaky yellow house that smelled of cinnamon and old wood. One December, she pressed something small into my hand, a silver bell no bigger than a walnut cool against my palm. "Whenever you feel invisible," she whispered, "ring this. Not for them, for yourself. To remind you you're here and you matter." I never rang it in front of anyone, but I carried it in my pocket during exams, during recitals, during the nights when Aaron got another toy, another trip, another proud look. The soft jingle became my secret heartbeat. Aaron was 3 years younger but carried himself like the world owed him something. Maybe because in our house it did. He came home with mud on his cleats and my father would laugh. "That's a real boy." I came home with a perfect report card and my mother would say, "That's nice, honey," before pivoting to Aaron's next soccer match. I kept trying. I thought if I worked harder, stayed up later, memorized more, smiled wider, eventually they'd see me. But effort in our house was currency that only Aaron could cash. I still remember one summer night when I brought home a trophy from a regional math competition. I set it on the kitchen table, heart pounding, waiting for them to walk in. They did. My father's eyes skimmed the gold plate, then shifted past me. "Don't leave stuff lying around," he said. A minute later, Aaron barged in shouting about a new bike. My trophy was pushed aside for dinner. That night, I tucked the silver bell under my pillow and cried until the sheets were damp. Looking back, I think that was the moment I understood the rules. No matter what I achieved, I was never going to be enough for them. Still, a stubborn part of me refused to give up. I hoarded small victories, spelling bees, debate medals, scholarships, as if one day I could stack them high enough to climb into their line of sight. The bell followed me everywhere, hidden but constant. Each time it jingled in my pocket, it whispered the same promise: you are not invisible, even if they pretend you are. When I left Cleveland for Chicago, I thought distance would make the hurt fade. It didn't. It only sharpened it. The city was louder, meaner, its winters colder than anything Ohio had prepared me for. My first week of freshman year, I stood outside the student union, the wind cutting through my thrift store coat, and watched other kids hug parents who'd flown in to settle them. My parents didn't come. They'd spent the weekend driving Aaron to a soccer camp in Florida. So I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. I worked 3 jobs, stocking shelves at dawn, tutoring in the afternoons, bussing tables at night while taking a full load in computer science and business. My fingers were always cracked from detergent, my shoes always wet from snow. Sometimes walking home past Lake Michigan at 2 a.m., I'd feel the silver bell in my pocket and give it the faintest shake. The sound was swallowed by the wind, but it anchored me. There were nights when exhaustion pressed so heavy I wanted to disappear. One winter break, I called home, hoping maybe they'd ask how finals went. My father answered. "We're decorating the tree, Selena," he said briskly. In the background, I heard laughter, Aaron singing off-key to carols. "We'll talk later." The line went dead. I sat alone in my dorm lights, flickering ramen cup cooling beside me. I wanted to scream, but instead I opened my laptop and kept coding. By senior year, while Aaron was on his second gap year trip posting photos from Spain and Thailand, I was buried in algorithms and side projects. My idea was still rough, an AI-powered customer relationship tool that could anticipate client needs before they even voiced them. Professors called it ambitious. Friends called it insane. Investors called it premature. But when I closed my eyes, I saw it alive lines of code knitting themselves into something powerful. After graduation, I landed an entry-level job at a tiny Chicago tech firm. The office was cramped, the pay a joke, but I treated it like grad school. I soaked up everything, stayed late, asked questions nobody else bothered with. During lunch breaks, while coworkers scrolled their phones, I scribbled ideas on napkins. At night, I'd head back to my studio apartment, a shoebox with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed like an angry cat, and keep building. The first prototype of my software was a disaster. It crashed constantly, misread data, and once sent 347 duplicate emails to a test account. I stared at the error messages until my eyes blurred, tears hot with shame. But I couldn't stop. I'd failed before, failed to win their love, failed to be seen, and I'd survived. Failure was familiar. Quitting was not an option. I pitched the software to investors with a borrowed blazer and a resume that didn't impress anyone. Dozens turned me down. One told me almost kindly, "Go find a real job, sweetheart." I walked out, nails biting into my palm, the bell heavy in my pocket. Year after year, I refined. Stripped features down, rebuilt them, tested again. I lived on black coffee and grocery store pasta, skipped birthdays, forgot what weekends felt like. My social life shrank to one loyal friend, Olivia, who called me Steel because of the way I kept going when everything screamed, "Stop." The breakthrough came 5 years in. A mid-size retail chain agreed to pilot the system. When the results rolled in, sales up 23% in 1 quarter, they signed a contract. Then another company came calling, and another. Suddenly, doors that had been bolted shut swung wide. I incorporated under the name Luminar Systems, moved into a real office, and hired my first team. We were scrappy, underpaid, fueled by late-night pizza and too much caffeine. But we believed. Within 3 years, Luminar wasn't a dream, it was a player. By year 4, Forbes called. I mailed the magazine home, a sticky note tucked on the page where my face smiled in a blazer too big for me. "Thought you might like to see this," I wrote. Days passed, then weeks. No call, no mention. The next time my mother phoned, it was to gush about Aaron's new girlfriend and her very good family. It didn't surprise me, but it still cut deep. I looked at the bell on my desk, its surface worn smooth from years in my hand, and promised myself if they refused to see me, the world would. San Francisco was dressed for Christmas, but I felt stripped bare. Every street I walked down was strung with glittering lights, store windows glowing with wreaths and fake snow. Couples held hands, parents tugged children in red sweaters. Strangers hummed along to carols leaking out of cafes. I passed through it all, like a ghost, my own reflection in the glass, a reminder of what I was not invited to. It started with a phone call from my mother 3 weeks before the holiday, already unusual. Her voice was sweeter than usual, high-pitched, syrupy. "We're having everyone over for Christmas Eve, Selena. It would be lovely if you could join us." For a moment, my chest warmed. Maybe finally, after years of being an afterthought, they wanted me there. But then, she continued almost giddy. "Aaron is bringing his girlfriend, Marissa Goldwell. She works for Hardwell & Partners, you've heard of them, right? Harvard MBA. Her father's a partner. Her family summers in the Hamptons. Isn't that exciting? Can you imagine our family rising into that world?" The warmth in me collapsed like a building gutted by fire. "That sounds nice," I said, carefully, trying to mask the sting. I tried to mention my own news that Luminar Systems had just been featured in Forbes, that we were preparing for a European expansion. My mother's pause was long enough to sting her dismissal casual. "That's nice, dear. Anyway, Marissa's so fashion-forward, so sophisticated. Wear something pleasant, won't you?" None of those business suits. When the line went dead, I stared at the phone, numb. I should have expected it. They didn't want me. They wanted a prop, someone to make Aaron's new girlfriend shine brighter. A week later, my father called. He rarely called me directly, so I answered on the first ring. "Selena," he said, no greeting voice clipped. "About Christmas." Your mother and I think it might be best if you don't come this year." The words fell like a punch I hadn't braced for. "What? Why? Aaron's girlfriend comes from a good family. We don't want anything complicated. We need to show her we're respectable. You understand?" I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles burned. "Complicated? I run a company, Dad. I'm the CEO of Luminar Systems. What exactly is so complicated about all that independent woman stuff? Always one-upping your brother, your obsession with career. It isn't what families like hers respect." His tone rose sharper now. "Think about Aaron for once. He has a future here. Don't ruin it." My throat ached with unshed tears, but my voice came out steady. "I understand. Enjoy your Christmas." And that was that. They chose Aaron's prospects over my presence. Again. On Christmas Eve, I sat in my San Francisco apartment, the city skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. I had decorated a small tree, barely 3 feet tall, a string of white lights twined around its branches. The silver bell hung near the top, catching the glow, the only ornament that meant something to me. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that gnawed at you. My assistant Callista had texted me an invitation to her mother's eggnog party. Olivia had begged me to join her family's dinner, promising laughter food and children clamoring for Aunt Selena. I'd said no to both. I didn't want to intrude. I told myself I was fine alone. But as the clock slid toward 7, the silence grew unbearable. I caved. Olivia's text blinked on my screen. "The ham is in the oven, wine's waiting. Don't make me send the twins to drag you." I stared at the bell on the tree, heard Grandma's voice in my memory. "Whenever you feel invisible, ring this. For yourself." So I did. Just once. The sound was tiny, swallowed by the room. But it was enough. I grabbed my coat. An hour later, I stood on Olivia's driveway in the suburbs, clutching a chocolate cake from the last open bakery. The front door burst open. Her twins tumbled out in Christmas pajamas, shrieking Aunt Selena. They hugged my legs, one nearly knocking the cake box to the ground. Inside, warmth enveloped me. The house smelled of cinnamon and roast ham. Every surface glittered with decoration stockings on the mantel, candles glowing in the windows. Olivia appeared from the kitchen apron, dusted with flour. "You came?" she cried, hugging me so hard I nearly dropped the cake again. Her husband Dorian grinned, their toddler perched on his hip. About time. She's been checking her phone every 5 minutes. We ate, we laughed, we opened gifts. The kids begged me to play board games, and no one once asked about my job or compared me to Aaron. For one night, I wasn't the forgotten daughter or the overachieving sister. I was just Selena, loved, wanted, welcome. Later, helping Olivia wash dishes, I whispered, "Thank you. I needed this more than I realized." She squeezed my hand. "Your family cell." Always. Driving home, I thought maybe that was enough. Family didn't have to mean blood. But when I walked into my apartment, my phone buzzed. A text from Aaron. A photo of my parents, Aaron and Marissa, in front of the Christmas tree of my childhood home, smiling like they were the perfect family. The caption read, "Wish you could have been here. Maybe next year?" I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. The house had 5 bedrooms. Space had never been the problem. That night, as I slid the silver bell off the tree and back into my pocket, something inside me hardened. If they wouldn't see me, I would stop asking. The week between Christmas and New Year's was supposed to be quiet. My team was on vacation, the office dark, except for the security lights, but I couldn't stay away. While families gathered in living rooms filled with wrapping paper and laughter, I sat in Luminar's corner office with the blinds half closed, the glow of the monitor painting my face blue. The silence was almost luxurious. No buzzing phones, no meetings to sprint to. Just me, the hum of the heating system, and the bell on my desk catching the dim light. I worked 14-hour days without interruption, sharpening our 5-year expansion plan, sketching marketing strategies, even cold emailing potential European partners. By the time January rolled in with gray skies and drizzle, I had transformed that silence into momentum. Contracts with 2 Fortune 500 companies landed on my desk. Our new AI module was finally gaining traction. We were hiring dozens across every department. Luminar Systems wasn't a scrappy startup anymore. We were a player. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like armor. If family was going to be a wound I couldn't close, then I would build something so solid, so undeniable that I wouldn't need their approval. One gray afternoon in March, Ms. Parker, our HR director, knocked on my door. She carried a folder, her expression caught between professional composure and something more delicate, almost concerned. "Selena," she said, stepping inside. The rain was tapping against the windows, steady like fingers drumming impatience. "We've narrowed the candidates for the senior project manager role. About 20 left. But," she placed the folder in front of me, "I think you should see this one personally." I flipped it open and froze. The name on the resume stared back at me in bold font, Aaron Dawson. For a moment, the office around me blurred, my pulse hammered in my ears. The resume was padded with inflated job titles, vague responsibilities, half-baked accomplishments. His current role, executive marketing strategist at a local firm, was at best a mid-level position. I kept reading bile rising in my throat. Python, Java, agile project management, none of which he could actually do, I knew, because I'd lived with him. He'd struggled to install antivirus software on his laptop when we were teens. "Was he aware you're the CEO?" Ms. Parker asked gently. "No." My voice sounded flat, distant. "Not a clue." She gave a humorless laugh. "That tracks." During the phone screening, he was condescending, asked to speak to someone who actually makes decisions. Poor Saran nearly quit. I pressed my palm against the cool desk surface, grounding myself. The old ache stirred, years of being invisible erased, and now my brother was here unknowingly asking me to hand him the keys to what I had built with my blood and sleepless nights. On paper, he wasn't qualified. Ms. Parker confirmed as much. "But he did mention some connections," she added, rolling her eyes. The team pushed him forward. "Against my recommendation. Connections. Always connections. His lifeline, his parachute, the invisible scaffolding my parents built around him." "When is the interview?" I asked. "Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. I closed the folder and leaned back. Options raced through my head. I could reject him outright fair, given his lack of skills. I could recuse myself entirely, leave it to the panel. Or I could finally let him see. For once, he'd face me, not as the sister in the shadows, but as the CEO in the spotlight. My hand brushed the silver bell. It was cold, grounding. Grandma's whisper floated back, "You matter." "Treat him like any other candidate," I told Ms. Parker. My voice was steady, but inside everything quaked. "If he's not qualified, he doesn't advance. But I'd like to observe, quietly, as a board member. He doesn't need to know." She nodded. "We can arrange that." That night, I barely slept. Lying in the dark, I replayed his smirk at family dinners, my parents' endless praise, the sting of their rejection at Christmas. Tomorrow, Aaron would walk into my world. He would sit across from people who valued merit over connections, and I would be there, not as his sister desperate for recognition, but as the CEO who had built something no one could take away. Still, a question gnawed at me as dawn broke and the city began to stir. Would exposing the truth finally free me, or only deepen the rift that had defined my life? The conference room gleamed like a stage floor-to-ceiling windows, flooding the table with afternoon light rain clouds breaking just enough to send shafts of gold across the polished wood. The city sprawled behind Aaron as he walked in his silhouette, confident shoulders, squared tie adjusted with that old practiced flick. I sat at the far end, just an observer flanked by 2 executives. My heart pounded, but I kept my face unreadable, fingers curled around the silver bell hidden in my pocket. "Thank you for the opportunity," Aaron said, shaking hands with the panel. His smile had the same smug tilt I remembered from childhood. "I've been following Luminar's growth closely, excited about the chance to bring my expertise here." Expertise, I thought, nearly scoffing. He had no idea what the company actually did. Jordan, our tech director, opened. "Tell us about your experience managing complex technical projects." Aaron leaned back, voice smooth. "I coordinated a major marketing campaign budget in the millions, multiple departments. We exceeded expectations. And which project management framework did you use?" Jordan pressed. Aaron hesitated. "I don't believe in rigid methodologies. Flexibility is key. I adapt." Mia, our senior PM, jumped in. Could you show us how you'd set up a Kanban board for a software development team? Aaron's smile faltered. Well, I'd delegate that to technical staff. My strength is strategy. Big picture. The panel exchanged looks. I said nothing, only watched. Minutes passed, questions sharpened. Aaron's answers grew evasive. At one point, he even chuckled condescending. Let's be honest, leaders like me aren't hired to code. We're hired because of vision and connections. Vision and connections. The same song he'd been singing his whole life. Finally, Ms. Parker closed her notepad. Before we wrap, she said evenly our CEO would like to ask a few questions. The air shifted. All eyes turned toward the end of the table, toward me. I stood, every muscle trembling but my expression composed. Aaron's eyes lifted. Recognition dawned in slow, excruciating waves, confusion, disbelief, then horror. His color drained. "Hello, Aaron," I said quietly, extending my hand. "It's been a while." His palm was clammy when it met mine. You're the CEO, Selena Dawson, founder and CEO of Luminar Systems." I confirmed, taking the seat across from him. I recused myself from earlier stages, but I do make the final decisions for senior hires. The panel stayed silent, riveted. I opened his folder. I see you listed Executive Marketing Strategist as your current title. Interesting, because when I spoke with Mr. Hargrove about a potential collaboration last week, he referred to you as a marketing associate. Can you explain the discrepancy? Aaron stammered. It's a functional title. More responsibility than the label suggests. I nodded, making a note. And you claim proficiency in Python and Java. Could you briefly describe how you'd use either language to build an API integration? Sweat beaded at his temple. As I said, I oversee teams who handle that sort of thing. I focus on the strategy, not coding. I closed the folder slowly. The silver bell pressed into my palm, grounding me. One last question. You mentioned having valuable business connections. Could you share specific examples of how those connections have generated measurable results in your current role? His voice cracked. Well, my girlfriend's father. He's a partner at a major consulting firm. My dad knows several business owners in Cleveland who might. His words trailed off into silence. The panel's faces were unreadable. My own expression stayed calm. Inside, though, a fierce clarity rose. For once, Aaron's merit or lack of it was undeniable. Thank you for your time, I said, rising. Our HR team will follow up. He shook my hand again, his grip weak, his eyes darting. Then he was gone, the door shutting behind him with a soft thud that echoed louder than any applause. Jordan let out a low whistle. Well, that was something. Mia raised her brows. He's your brother. Yes, I said, simply gathering my notes, and that's why I stayed out until now. Treat his application like any other. Back in my office, I locked the door and let out the breath I'd been holding. No triumph, no gloating. Just closure. But it didn't last. Minutes later, Ms. Parker's voice crackled through the phone. Selena, your brother is still here. He's upset. He's on the phone with someone I think your father. They're insisting on coming up. Cold washed through me. My parents. Here. Send them up, I said after a pause, and ask Callista to join us in 10 minutes. Witnesses would help. Aaron stormed in first, face flushed. What the hell was that? He shouted. You humiliated me. I stayed seated. That was an interview. You applied without knowing who I was. You weren't prepared. You asked impossible questions, he snapped. You set me up. Those were standard for the role, I replied evenly. Before he could retort, the door burst open. My father marched in, jaw tight, my mother trailing behind her eyes, sweeping the office with startled awe. What does this mean? My father thundered. You embarrassed your brother in front of strangers? Is this revenge? Hello, Dad? Mom, I gestured to the chairs. Please sit. Don't tell me what to do, he snapped. You ambushed him. I did nothing of the sort. Aaron applied here. He faced the same process as everyone else. My mother's voice trembled. You're really the CEO here. Her gaze flicked to the awards on the wall, the skyline beyond. Yes, Mom. I started this company 6 years ago. My father waved it away. That isn't the point. The point is, Aaron needs this job and you can give it to him. That's what family does. Family, I repeated the word sour. Where was family when you barred me from Christmas, when you refused to help me pay for college, when every success of mine was dismissed as independent woman stuff? My father reddened. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. No, I said, voice steady, sharp. You raised Aaron. You invested in him. You erased me. And now you want me to erase my standards, my company's integrity for him? No. Silence thickened. The rain outside hammered harder against the glass as if punctuating my words. Finally, I added softer. But I'm not shutting him out. If Aaron wants to start at entry level in marketing, he's welcome. He can learn work, prove himself. But he will not leapfrog into a senior role he cannot handle. Aaron's face twisted. Entry level. After everything. No thanks. Then that's your choice, I said. My father stood disgust etched across his face. Come on, we're leaving. She's lost. They turned toward the door, but my mother hesitated. Her eyes swept the office one last time, landing on me. Your office is lovely, she murmured. You've done well. Not an apology, but something. And then they were gone, the echo of the door closing sealing the confrontation like a verdict. I exhaled my hand, finding the silver bell in my pocket. Its cool weight reminded me I had stood my ground. For once, I hadn't let them shrink me. 2 weeks passed in silence. No calls, no texts, no emails from my family. I poured myself into work as if nothing had happened, though at night, lying in the half-dark of my apartment, the echoes of my father's voice replayed. You embarrassed your brother. You always have to outdo him. It stung less now, but it still stung. Then, on a gray Sunday afternoon, my building's security desk buzzed. Ms. Dawson, your parents are here. Should I send them up? I froze teacup halfway to my lips. My parents had never stepped foot in my San Francisco apartment. Not once. Part of me wanted to refuse. Another part, tired, curious, wary, said, send them up. When the elevator doors opened, they looked older than I remembered. My father's shoulders sagged under a weight he didn't try to hide. My mother's smile was tentative, her eyes flicking around the apartment as if searching for something familiar. Thank you for seeing us, she said softly, her voice stripped of its usual lilt. We sat in the living room. The city outside glowed pale clouds pressing low. My father spoke first. Aaron lost his job. Day after the interview, his boss found out he'd been looking. Fired him on the spot. I nodded, not surprised. And Marissa. They broke up, my mother admitted. She said she needed to focus on her career. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, I felt a flicker of pity for Aaron. Losing both his job and relationship in 1 week, anyone would be reeling. We've been thinking, my father said, finally clearing his throat as though forcing the words out. About Christmas? About the way we treated you? My mother's hands twisted in her lap. We were wrong, Selena. We didn't want to see your work for what it was. We wanted Aaron to shine so badly that we ignored you. Excluding you from Christmas. It was cruel. Hearing my father admit wrongness was like watching a mountain crack. For years, his certainty had been immovable. Now, fissures showed. Why now? I asked quietly. Because Aaron needs a job or because you finally see me? Both looked stricken. My father swallowed. Partly because of him, but also because we saw your office, your people, your company. We realized we don't even know you anymore. We should have been proud. We weren't. That's on us. I let the words sink in. They didn't erase the years of silence, of favoritism, of rejection. But they mattered. A little. The offer I made still stands, I said. If Aaron wants to start at entry level, he can. No shortcuts. He'll earn every step. That's fair, my father admitted. I'll tell him. We sat in a fragile quiet, a truce balanced on thin glass. Then, my mother asked hesitantly, how did you do it? Build everything without us? It was the first time she had ever asked me that question with genuine curiosity, so I told her. About coding until dawn in a shoebox apartment, about eating ramen 5 nights a week, about rejections that nearly broke me, about the moment one small contract changed everything. As I spoke, I saw something shift in their eyes. Not just acknowledgement, respect. When they left an hour later, the apartment felt different. Not healed, but opened, like a window cracked after years of stale air. The following week, Aaron called Ms. Parker in HR. His voice was subdued, she told me later, almost embarrassed. He applied for the entry-level marketing role. The panel interviewed him without my involvement and offered him the job. To my surprise, he accepted despite the pay cut. On his first day, he came to my office standing stiffly in the doorway. "I want to do this right," he said. "Learn the business, earn it, and I'm sorry about Christmas, about a lot." I looked at him for a long moment. The same brother who once smirked when I cried over being excluded, now standing small, stripped of bravado. "Show me with actions," I told him. "That's how trust is rebuilt." He nodded and left. Months slipped by. Aaron surprised me. He arrived early, stayed late, asked questions instead of assuming answers. He stumbled, yes, sometimes defaulting to entitlement, but he learned. Slowly, he began to shed the scaffolding of connections and stand on his own. My mother started calling too. Small at first, asking how work was going, what projects we were working on. My father sent clippings from trade magazines circling articles about AI with awkward notes. "Thought of you." It was halting, imperfect, but it was something. By July, an invitation arrived to their anniversary dinner. No conditions, no exclusions. Just family. I hesitated before replying. Old wounds don't vanish with a single apology. But I accepted. The dinner was held in New Jersey at a quiet restaurant with warm light and white tablecloths. Aaron sat across from me, subdued but steady. My parents sat side by side, less polished than I remembered, more human. When the waiter poured champagne, I reached for the glass. Around my neck, on a delicate chain, hung the silver bell, the same one Grandma had given me decades ago. It caught the candlelight as I lifted my glass. I thought of all the nights I'd rung it silently in my pocket just to remind myself I existed. Tonight, its sound wasn't needed. Its presence was enough. "We've come a long way," I said, my voice steady, soft but edged with truth. Aaron raised his glass. "To doing it right this time." My parents followed. Not perfect, not redeemed, but trying. As the bell gleamed against my skin, I realized standing my ground hadn't destroyed my family. It had forced a reckoning, and from the cracks of the old, something new, fragile but real, had begun to grow. If this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to subscribe for more family betrayal and redemption stories. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear if you've ever stood your ground the way Selena did.